Hello.
Former Marine Michael Reed returns home to Texas, hoping for a quiet life with his wife Emily and daughter. But a mysterious phone call shatters his world. His lover is cheating with his best friend. Angry and broken, Michael vows revenge. But can he unravel the web of lies without losing himself? Find out how far a man whose world has been shattered will go. Michael Reed stepped off the plane onto the sun-scorched tarmac of Austin Bergstrom International Airport, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder. At 38, the former Marine had seen enough dust and chaos to last a lifetime. 10 years of service, missions in scorching deserts, and sleepless nights under fire had hardened him, but now he was home. Texas stretched out before him, wide and familiar, promising a quiet life with his wife, Emily, and their 8-year-old daughter, Sophia. He'd pictured it 1,000 times. Barbecues in the backyard, Sophia's laughter filling the air, and Emily's warm smile waiting at the door. After all the deployments, he was ready to trade his combat boots for a pair of worn-in sneakers. The drive from the airport to their modest ranch-style home in East Austin was a blur of pickup trucks and neon signs. Michael's hands gripped the steering wheel of his old Ford, the hum of the engine a steady comfort. He pulled into the driveway just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Sophia bolted out the front door, her dark curls bouncing as she threw herself into his arms. "Daddy!" she squealed, and for a moment, everything felt right. Emily followed, her blonde hair tied back, offering a tired smile. "Welcome home, Mike," she said, her voice soft but distant. He chalked it up to exhaustion. Running a house and raising a kid alone for months couldn't be easy. The first few days were a clumsy dance of readjustment. Michael tried to settle into civilian life, fixing leaky faucets and taking Sophia to the park. But something gnawed at him. Emily was different, quieter, her eyes avoiding his. She'd always been his rock, the one who sent him letters during deployments, who waited without complaint. Now, her late nights at work stretched longer, and her excuses felt thin. He didn't want to doubt her. Not after 12 years together. Not after everything they'd built. Then came the rain. It was a Thursday night, the kind of Texas downpour that turned streets into rivers. Sophia was asleep, her stuffed bunny tucked under her arm, when Michael's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He frowned at the unknown number flashing on the screen. Against his better judgment, he answered, "You know where your wife is right now?" The voice was rough like gravel under boots, with a faint drawl. Michael's stomach tightened. "Who is this?" he demanded, but the caller didn't pause. "She ain't at the office, Marine. Check the Sunset Motel, off I-35. You'll see." The line went dead before Michael could respond. He sat there, the phone still in his hand, rain hammering the windows. His mind raced. A prank? A mistake? But the address burned into his thoughts, sharp and unyielding. He grabbed his keys, left a note for Sophia's babysitter next door, and stepped into the storm. The wipers on his truck slashed through the deluge as he drove north, each mile twisting the knot in his gut tighter. The Sunset Motel loomed ahead, a faded sign flickering in the wet night. He parked across the street, his breath fogging the windshield. Then he saw her. Emily stepped out of room 12, her jacket pulled tight against the rain. She wasn't alone. A man followed, his arm brushing hers as they laughed under the awning. Michael's heart stopped. He knew that face, Jake Crow, his best friend from the Corps. The guy who'd taken a bullet for him in Kandahar. The guy he trusted with his life. Now Jake was standing there, casual as ever, with his wife. Michael's hands clenched the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. He wanted to storm across the lot, demand answers, let the rage boiling inside him spill out. But he didn't. Years of training kicked in, control, assess, act. He watched them climb into Jake's truck and disappear into the night, leaving him alone with the rain and a truth he couldn't unsee. Back home, he sat in the dark living room, the silence pressing against him. Sophia slept upstairs, oblivious. Emily would come back soon, spinning some story about a late meeting. And Jake had betrayed him in a way no enemy ever could. Michael's mind churned with questions, but one rose above the rest. Why? He didn't have answers yet, but he knew one thing. He wouldn't let this break him. Not without a fight. Whatever came next, he'd face it head-on, like the Marine he was. But first he needed proof. And a plan. Michael Reed didn't sleep that night. The image of Emily and Jake under the motel awning played on a loop in his mind. Each laugh, and touch of fresh cut to his pride. By the time the first light crept through the blinds of his East Austin home, he'd made a decision. He wouldn't confront her. Not yet. Rage wouldn't get him answers, and answers were what he needed. He kissed Sophia's forehead as she stirred awake, her sleepy voice asking, "Pancakes today, Daddy?" He forced a smile. "Sure, kiddo. Pancakes, it is." Keeping things normal for her was his anchor, the one thing he could still control. Emily shuffled into the kitchen an hour later, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. "Rough night at the office," she muttered, pouring coffee. Michael nodded, his jaw tight, letting the lie hang between them. He watched her move, nervous, distracted, and knew she was hiding more than a late shift. After dropping Sophia at school, he drove to a quiet diner on the edge of town, a place where the coffee was strong and the booths were private. There, he called the one person he could still trust, Kyle West. Kyle had been a Marine too, a wiry guy with sharp eyes and a knack for finding what others wanted hidden. Now a private investigator, he traded fatigues for a leather jacket and a beat-up Chevy. He slid into the booth across from Michael, his grin fading when he saw the look on his friend's face. "You look like hell, Reed. What's up?" Michael didn't waste time. "Emily's cheating. With Jake Crow. I need you to dig into it. Everything you can find." Kyle whistled low, leaning back. "Jake? The guy who dragged you out of that firefight? Damn, man. You sure?" Michael slid his phone across the table, showing a blurry photo he'd snapped at the motel. Kyle's expression hardened. "All right. I'll tail them, see what's what. But you gotta stay cool, Mike. Don't do anything stupid." Michael nodded, though the fire in his chest begged for release. "Just give me proof. I'll handle the rest." Over the next few days, Michael played the part of the oblivious husband. He fixed the porch swing, grilled burgers for Sophia, and kept his questions locked away. Emily's late nights grew more frequent, her excuses flimsier. Then, on Friday, Kyle called. "Meet me at the warehouse district near the old rail yard. Got something you need to see." Michael left Sophia with a neighbor and drove across town, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red. Kyle was waiting in his Chevy, parked under a flickering street lamp. He handed Michael a folder. "Jake's not just stepping out with your wife, man. He's dirty, running aside, gig moving stuff across the border. Not drugs, though. Looks like knockoff electronics, maybe some cash, too. Small time, but shady as hell." Michael flipped through the photos. Jake at a rundown warehouse, shaking hands with rough-looking guys in trucker caps. Emily in the background of one, her face tense. "She's involved?" he asked, voice low. "Not sure," Kyle admitted. "Could be she's just along for the ride. But here's the kicker. I dug into Jake's crew. One of his buddies let slip he's been bragging about taking what's his." "Sounds personal, Mike." The words hit like a punch. Jake wasn't just betraying him. He was claiming victory. Michael's grip tightened on the folder, but then Kyle dropped the real bomb. "There's more. I tapped a call yesterday. Emily's scared. Kept saying she didn't sign up for this. I think she's in over her head." Michael's mind spun. Scared? Of Jake? Of something bigger? The Emily he knew was steady, not the type to stumble into a mess like this. "What's this?" he pressed. Kyle shrugged. Couldn't get the full convo, too much static. "But she's meeting him tonight, out by Lake Travis. I say we crash it." Michael hesitated. Confronting them now could blow everything, but waiting felt like surrender. "All right," he said finally. "Let's go." The drive to Lake Travis was silent, the dark water glinting under a half-moon. They parked a quarter-mile from the spot Kyle had scouted, a secluded dock where Jake's truck was already idling. Michael crouched behind a cluster of cedars, Kyle at his side, as Emily stepped out of the shadows. Jake met her, his voice carrying on a breeze. "You're late. We've got a shipment tomorrow. Need you to play nice with the buyer." Emily's reply was sharp. "I told you, Jake, I'm done. This isn't what I wanted." Jake laughed, cold and cutting. "Too late for that, Em. You're in it now." Michael's blood ran hot, then cold. She wasn't laughing with him this time. She was trapped. But why? What hold did Jake have? Before he could process it, headlights flashed in the distance. Another car rolled up, and a burly figure stepped out, his voice gruff. "Crow, you better not screw this up. Boss ain't happy." Jake tensed, and Emily backed away, her hands trembling. Michael's instincts screamed to move, but Kyle grabbed his arm. "Not yet, man. We need more." As the men argued, Michael pieced it together. Jake wasn't just a cheat. He was a cog in something bigger, and Emily was caught in the gears. The truth was unraveling, but it wasn't the one he'd expected. Whatever came next, he'd have to play it smart or lose everything. Michael Reed drove back from Lake Travis with his mind in overdrive, the hum of Kyle's Chevy a faint backdrop to the storm brewing inside him. The night air was thick with the scent of cedar and damp earth, but all he could focus on was Emily's trembling hands and Jake's cold laugh echoing in his ears. She wasn't just cheating. She was scared, tangled in something bigger than a fling. And Jake wasn't the man Michael had known in the core. The guy who'd once had his back was now a stranger, pulling strings in a game Michael didn't yet understand. Back at Kyle's cramped apartment in South Austin, the two men spread out the evidence on a rickety kitchen table. Photos, call logs, a grainy shot of the burly guy from the dock. Kyle had been thorough. "This isn't just Jake messing around," Kyle said, tapping a picture of the warehouse. "He's moving stuff for someone higher up. That guy tonight? I bet he's muscle for the real boss." Michael stared at the image of Emily, her face tight with worry. "And her? What's her role?" Kyle shrugged, his brow creasing. "Could be anything. Courier, lookout, unwilling pawn. Point is, she's not calling the shots." Michael leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "She said she's done." Jake didn't care. "What's he got on her?" Kyle pulled out a recorder and hit play. Emily's voice crackled through static. "I didn't sign up for this, Jake. You promised it'd be one time." Jake's reply was smug. "You're too deep to walk away, Em. Think about Sophia." Michael's blood froze. Sophia. His little girl was the leverage. The room spun for a moment, but he forced himself to focus. "He's using my daughter to keep her in line," he said, voice low and steady despite the rage clawing at him. Kyle nodded grimly. "That's my guess, but we need more than guesses. I can keep digging, track this new guy, see who he reports to. What's your move?" Michael's jaw tightened. He'd come home wanting peace, but now he was at war again, not with guns, but with wits. "I want Jake out of the picture. Legally. No blood, no mess. We take him down with what he's built." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about turning him in?" Michael met his gaze. "I'm talking about burying him in his own dirt. Cops get the evidence, he's done." The plan took shape over black coffee and a sleepless night. Kyle would tail Jake's next meet, get hard proof for the shipments, dates, times, locations. Michael would play dumb at home, watching Emily for clues. But the next morning threw a wrench in it all. Emily sat him down at the kitchen table, her hands twisting a napkin into knots. Sophia was at school, the house eerily quiet. "Mike," she started, her voice shaky, "we need to talk." He braced himself, keeping his face neutral. "About what?" She wouldn't meet his eyes. "I've been lying. Not just about work. I got into something stupid, and now I can't get out." Michael's pulse quickened, but he stayed silent, letting her spill. "It started months ago. Jake offered me a way to pay off some debts. Medical bills from Sophia's asthma last year. So it was a one-time thing, moving some packages. I didn't ask questions. Then it wasn't one time. He kept pushing, said if I stopped, he'd make sure Sophia paid for it." Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. Michael's hands clenched under the table, but he kept his tone even. "Pay how?" Emily swallowed hard. "He didn't say. Just hinted. I was terrified, Mike. I didn't want you to know. I thought I could fix it." He wanted to believe her, but the sting of betrayal still burned. "Why Jake?" he asked, sharper than he meant. She flinched. "He was there when you weren't. I didn't mean for it to go this far." The words hung heavy, a confession wrapped in regret. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. "Kyle, step outside," the text read. Michael excused himself, leaving Emily staring at the shredded napkin. Kyle was parked down the street, his face tense. "Got a hit. That guy from the dock. Name's Victor Ruiz. Worked for a guy named Delgado. Runs a smuggling ring out of San Antonio. Jake's small fry compared to him." Michael's mind raced. "And Emily?" Kyle hesitated. "She's in deeper than she thinks. Ruiz mentioned her name on a call. Said she's useful. They're not letting her go easy." The twist hit hard. Emily wasn't just a pawn. She was a target. Jake had dragged her into a web that stretched beyond Austin, and now Sophia was in the crosshairs too. Michael's plan shifted. Taking down Jake wasn't enough anymore. He had to dismantle the whole operation. "We need more," he told Kyle. "Recordings, manifests, something the cops can't ignore." Kyle nodded. "Next shipment's tomorrow night. Old quarry off 183. I'll set up surveillance. You in?" Michael didn't hesitate. "Yeah, let's end this." As he walked back inside, Emily looked up, her eyes pleading. "Mike, I'm sorry. I'll do anything to fix it." He studied her, the woman he'd loved for over a decade, now a stranger in his kitchen. "We'll fix it," he said, his voice firm but distant. "But you need to trust me now." She nodded, fragile hope flickering in her gaze. Michael turned away, his resolve hardening. Jake had started this fight, but Michael would finish it, on his terms, with the law as his weapon. Michael Reed stood in the dim glow of his East Austin kitchen, the weight of Emily's confession still sinking in. Her tear-streaked face lingered in his peripheral vision as he stared out the window, the streetlights casting long shadows across the yard. She'd been coerced, debts, threats, Jake's twisted leverage over Sophia. But the sting of her secrecy cut deeper than he'd expected. He'd spent the last 12 hours wrestling with it. Trust her again or go it alone. The clock was ticking, and Kyle's plan for the quarry sting tomorrow night loomed large. He needed her help, whether he liked it or not. "Mike," Emily's voice broke the silence, soft and hesitant. "What happens now?" He turned, meeting her red-rimmed eyes. "We take Jake down. All of them. But I need you to be straight with me. No more lies." She nodded, swallowing hard. "Anything you need. I swear." Michael pulled a chair out and sat across from her, his tone all business. "Tell me everything. Every meet, every name, every detail you've got on Jake and this Delgado guy." Emily took a shaky breath and started talking. She laid it out. The late-night handoffs at abandoned lots, the coded texts, the cash-stuffed envelopes she'd delivered under Jake's watch. Delgado's name had come up once, barked by the burly guy, Victor Ruiz, during a tense exchange. "Jake's scared of him," she said. "Keep saying Delgado doesn't mess around." Michael filed it away, his marine instincts kicking in. This wasn't just about Jake anymore. It was a ladder, and Delgado sat at the top. If they could topple the whole operation, Jake would fall hard. The next day dragged. Michael kept Sophia home from school, citing a stomach bug, and asked a neighbor to watch her. He couldn't risk her being anywhere near this mess. By dusk, he and Kyle were crouched in the scrub brush near the old quarry off Highway 183, a half-hour outside Austin. The air buzzed with cicadas as they set up, binoculars, a recorder, a camera with a long lens. Kyle pointed to a dirt road cutting through the rocks. "That's their route. Trucks due at 9 p.m. If we get this on tape, it's game over." Minutes ticked by, the tension coiling tighter. Then headlights pierced the dark. A beat-up cargo van rolled in, followed by Jake's familiar truck. Michael's pulse quickened as Jake stepped out, his posture cocky despite the nervous glance he threw over his shoulder. Victor Ruiz emerged from the van, his bulk dwarfing Jake, and tossed a duffel bag at his feet. "Delgado's getting antsy," Ruiz growled. "You better not screw this up, Crow." Jake smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Relax. I've got it handled." Michael zoomed in, the camera whirring softly. Cash changed hands, then boxes, electronics, maybe more. Kyle whispered, "Jackpot." But then the plan hit a snag. A third vehicle screeched in. A black SUV, dust billowing behind it. A man stepped out, his face obscured by a cap, but his voice carried authority. "Ruiz, what's the holdup?" Michael froze. "Delgado?" Kyle shook his head. No way he'd show up himself. Must be a lieutenant. The new guy scanned the quarry, and Michael ducked lower, his heart pounding. Jake's bravado faltered. "Everything's on track," he said, "too quick." The lieutenant snorted. "Better be. Delgado's got eyes on your little sidekick too, Emily. She's a loose end." Michael's grip tightened on the camera. Emily hadn't just been useful. She was a liability now. Jake shrugged, casual as ever. "She's under control. Won't talk." The lieutenant stepped closer, his tone icy. "She better not, or you're both done." The deal wrapped up fast, the vehicles peeling out into the night. Michael and Kyle stayed, put until the dust settled, then bolted to the Chevy. "They're on to her," Michael said, his voice tight. "We've got the tape, but if they move on Emily," Kyle cut in. "We tip the cops now. Anonymous drop. Let them raid the next meet before Jake can blink." Michael nodded, but a new twist gnawed at him. Emily was in deeper than she'd let on, and Delgado's crew knew it. Was she still hiding something? Back home, he found her pacing the living room, Sophia asleep upstairs. "It's done," he said, setting the recorder on the table. "Cops will have it by morning." Emily's relief was palpable, but then she grabbed his arm. "Mike, there's more. Jake called today. Said if I didn't meet him tomorrow, he'd send someone for Sophia. I didn't tell you because I thought I could handle it." Michael's stomach dropped. Another lie, another risk. "You should have told me," he snapped, pulling away. "Now, they're watching you, and we're out of time." He called Kyle, who cursed under his breath. "We've got one shot. Set up the meet. Let Jake think she's playing along. I'll get a friend in the sheriff's office to move fast. Michael turned to Emily, his trust fraying, but his resolve ironclad. You're doing this my way now. We bait him, and he's finished. She nodded, fear and guilt warring in her eyes. The Corey tape was gold, but this new threat flipped the script. Jake wasn't just a traitor. He was desperate, and desperate men made mistakes. Michael will make sure this one cost him everything. Michael Reed woke before dawn, the weight of the day pressing on his chest like a loaded rucksack. The East Austin house was silent, save for the faint hum of the fridge and Sophia's soft breathing upstairs. Emily sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cold mug of coffee, eyes hollow from a sleepless night. Yesterday's revelations, Jake's threat, her name on Delgado's radar, had shifted the stakes. The Corey tape was in Kyle's hands en route to the sheriff's office, but today was the final play. Michael had one shot to end this, and he wasn't leaving anything to chance. Jake's expecting you at noon, he said, voice low but firm. Old gas station, off, Route 71. You'll go. Act like you're scared into line. Kyle's got eyes on it. Sheriff's deputies will be close. Emily nodded, her lip trembling. And Sophia? Michael's jaw tightened. She's staying with Kyle's sister in Round Rock till it's over. Safe. He'd dropped her off at sunrise, her sleepy hug lingering in his mind. Daddy's got to fix something, he'd told her, and she'd smiled, trusting as ever. That trust fueled him now. The morning crawled by. Michael checked his phone obsessively. Updates from Kyle, confirmations from the sheriff's contact. The Corey evidence had landed. Cash, boxes, Jake's voice on tape. Enough for a warrant, but they needed him in the act to seal it. At 11 a.m., Emily slipped into her jacket, her hands shaking as she grabbed her keys. Mike, if this goes wrong, he cut her off, meeting her gaze. It won't. Stick to the plan. She nodded, and he watched her drive off, a knot twisting in his gut. Trust was a fragile thread, but it was all they had left. Kyle met him a mile from the gas station, his Chevy tucked behind a stand of oaks. Deputies are staged, 2 units, plain clothes. They'll move when Jake bites. Michael nodded, peering through binoculars at the rusted pumps and cracked asphalt. Emily's car rolled in at 11:58, and Jake's truck followed minutes later. He stepped out, all swagger, but his eyes darted like a cornered animal's. You're late, he snapped as Emily approached. She hugged herself, voice small. I'm here, aren't I? Just tell me what to do. Michael's grip tightened on the binoculars. Jake tossed her a burner phone. Next drop's tonight. You're calling the shots with Ruiz. Keep him happy, or Sophia's next. Emily flinched, and Michael's blood boiled. But she played her part, nodding meekly. Okay, I'll do it. Jake smirked, turning to leave, then froze as tires crunched gravel. 2 unmarked cars screeched in, deputies spilling out, badges flashing. Hands up, Crow, one shouted, gun drawn but steady. Jake bolted for his truck, but a deputy tackled him, pinning him to the dirt. Emily stumbled back, hands raised as ordered. Michael exhaled, the tension snapping like a cut wire. Kyle clapped his shoulder. Got him. Within minutes, Jake was cuffed, his curses echoing as they hauled him to a cruiser. The deputies took Emily's statement. She'd been coerced, she said, tears streaming. They let her go with a warning, the Corey tape backing her story. But it wasn't over. Kyle's phone buzzed hours later. Sheriff's update. The tape had cracked Delgado's operation wide open. Raids hit 3 warehouses that night, netting Ruiz and a dozen others. Jake flipped fast, spilling names for a lighter sentence. Delgado's empire crumbled, his arrest plastered across the evening news. Michael watched it from Kyle's couch, Sophia curled beside him, oblivious to the storm she'd never know. Emily came home at dusk, her face a mix of relief and shame. It's done? She asked, hovering in the doorway. Michael nodded, his voice flat. Jake's looking at 10 years, minimum. Delgado's finished. You're clear. She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry, Mike. I thought I was protecting her. He didn't answer right away, the silence heavy. You should have trusted me, he said finally. But Sophia's safe. That's what matters. The next week, he packed a suitcase, his and Sophia's clothes, her favorite bunny. Emily watched, eyes pleading. Where are you going? San Antonio, he said, zipping the bag. Fresh start. You can figure things out here, get a job, get clean. I'll make sure Sophia sees you when you're ready. She nodded, tears falling but didn't argue. He wasn't forgiving. Not yet. But he wasn't abandoning her either. She'd face her consequences, just like Jake. Driving west with Sophia, singing in the back seat, Michael felt the weight lift bit by bit. Justice had prevailed, not with fists, but with truth. The road ahead was open, and for the first time in months, he could breathe.
Goodbye.